How are we doing this morning? Good. Thanks for being here on a Saturday morning. I appreciate you showing up. For those that haven't met me before, I do see a couple faces I haven't seen before, which is nice. That's one of the reasons we did this on a Saturday. I'm Branden Durst, I'm the superintendent here at West Bonner County School District, and this is our third town hall that we've hosted for our community. When I was hired for this position, I made a commitment that I would get out into the community and listen to people's concerns and answer their questions. And so that's why we're doing this. I may see about getting something set up in Laclede and possibly down in Blanchard as well, just to kind of, or Spirit Lake area, just to support the folks down there. But as far as is the current schedule, this is the last of the 3 town halls that we had originally planned. And I can just say that I've really appreciated hearing from a lot of folks about their concerns and their areas of interest for the school district. And one of the things that's really become clear to me is that there's a lot of passion about this district. The passion tends to kind of go 2 different ways, as it turns out, but it's good to know that people care about what's happening in their schools. And I'm hopeful we can utilize that passion to improve our school district so that way our kids are getting a better education, which is one of my top priorities. So just as a matter of kind of housekeeping or kind of logistics for this morning, as with the last 2 town halls, I'm going to just provide a real quick overview of what's been going on, things that we've been working on. There's a few updates even since the last one. And then I'll open it up for questions. We've got a microphone over here on the on my right, your left. If you can queue up behind that table and just ask your question, that would be awesome. I'm going to ask that we try to be as respectful and civil as we can be this morning. Just to recognize that, we may feel really passionately about something, but we can still communicate that in a respectful way, and try to avoid, personal attacks and that sort of thing. I understand that people are implementing things or doing things, and that's, there's a reason that you want to talk about that, but to the extent that you can make it, that you can avoid using names or attacking people individually, that would be, I think, conducive to a more productive discussion. So, as background, the district has been working through a lot of different issues. As many of you know, the district, the board approved a forensic audit and selected Eide Bailey as the forensic auditor to conduct that audit. Eide Bailey is a pretty nationally known company. They've got offices all over the country. They've conducted a lot of these sorts of audits before. And so when they came in with their bid the way they did, we were pretty pleased to have them be the best option for us. They have requested documentation from the district, which they gave us a deadline of yesterday at 5 p.m. to send to them to ensure that they would meet our first deadline, which is August 25th. And I can say that we met that deadline. And that was done, the collection of those documents was done by our new payroll and accounts payable clerk, Kendra Selesky. Many of you may know Kendra. She's the president of the Booster Club here in Priest River. And so with her extensive background in banking, she was able to navigate quite a few obstacles that we were facing pretty quickly. And so she was able to also get all those documents put together and transmitted to our auditor, which was a pretty Herculean task because it was a lot of stuff that had to get scanned in and mailed and organized and stuff. So she did a great job with that, and I really appreciate all of her efforts there. The other thing that's been going on, we've been doing quite a bit of hiring in the district, as you all are probably aware as well. We hired Peggy Letzenheiser as our new curriculum director. She served last year as our instructional coach. She's been our district assessment coordinator for a long time. She's got a lot of experience in this district and has the respect of, I think, all the teachers in the district. And so I think having her in that role and being able to provide some leadership to on the instructional side will be very helpful. She's going to be helping implement the new assessment system that we're utilizing to help improve student outcomes and our scores. And she's also going to be helping chair and running our curriculum adoption component. So as many of you know, currently the elementary schools don't have an LEA, language, you know what it is. Sorry, it's early. English Language Arts ELA committee. She's going to be working on chairing that committee and also creating a timeline for continual review. So that way we don't get caught off guard. So we're being strategic and planful around when we're going to review those curriculum, and so we have time to go through the full process to get those adopted. So I think that'll be a real strength for our community. We've also hired a new junior high school principal, and her name, that's Loretta Glazier she was a sixth grade teacher at BRE the last couple of years, and she's going to be able to bring in some new ideas and help hopefully improve the outcomes for our kids there too. We did hire a a new special education director. The lady's name is Dr. Courtney McKnight. She is from Texas. There were some questions before, and I'll kind of anticipate some that may come today, so I'll just talk about that right now. The district had tried to recruit a local special education director. We were even offering hiring bonuses to do that. We didn't get a single application for over a month. And so at which point I decided we had to do a bit of a pivot and try to find a way to hire somebody who was highly qualified, because federally we have to have somebody in that role. If we did not have somebody in that role, we could lose a whole bunch of federal money for our special education program, and that was not a viable option for all sorts of reasons. And so we've hired Dr. McKnight. She's going to be working in a hybrid remote position. She's amenable to being here as often as she needs to be. She's committed to being here at least once a quarter, if not more. She will be here twice in the first quarter. She'll be here for the first week of school and also for another time after that. So all of the IEP meetings that we do with our students and parents, those will be done in person. She will be here in person to get those completed. That'll be important for us to be able to make sure that we get those done the way that they need to be. And she can provide support for our staff and for our students with her position. She's got a phenomenal background. Many of you might have seen where she came from, but she's really top notch, and we're really lucky to have her. We've hired lots of great teachers. I met a couple of them yesterday. They were coming into PRE, great teachers that just left LCSC. Really, really excited. They're gals that were moms and went to school after they'd been moms for a while and decided they wanted to be teachers. So, really great hires that they're making at both the secondary and the elementary level. I guess I'll just conclude with this comment about the junior high school. We are responding to the community's concern and voice around that issue. We're setting up a plan to have cost assessments done and an analysis done to bring to the September board meeting with alternatives for the board to consider. We're going to set up some committee meetings with members of the community and people with expertise in the different things that we need to be aware of around land use planning and facilities and those sorts of things, to be able to have some really strong and practical and sustainable ideas for what we can do to make sure that building can be useful for our students. So we're gonna do that in a deliberate way, but it's going to be done expeditiously because we really don't have all the time in the world. We're done kicking the can down the road. We need to make decisions, but we also want to make sure that we bring people alongside of us to help us make those decisions as well. So that's the plan there. And we're happy with I guess one hire that I didn't mention that's going to be integral to that rollout is our new operations director, Ryan Caruth. He brings with him a really, really unique background. In fact, he may be the only person in the county who's got this certification, but he does building audits, and he actually has a specialty in manufacturing building audits. And that's a pretty specialized area. While we're not manufacturing, there's a lot of transferability between, an educational building and a manufacturing building. And so being able to leverage his understanding of code and OSHA regulations and those sorts of things to help audit our buildings and be able to see really what we need to have done and have somebody who in-house instead of having to pay somebody outside to do that will be really valuable for our district. And he's going to have, he's going to have a pretty clean eye on this. He's new to the district, and so being able to see things with a fresh eye I think will be helpful for him. So,
Can you say his last name again?
Caruth.
Correct, thank you.
I'm going to leave it there. Like I said, if you have questions, please line up over here by the mic and ask them one at a time, and we'll go through them. We're going to be here till 10 o'clock or till noon. And as you can hear, I'm already losing my voice, but we'll hopefully do our best. Yeah, she's excited about that. Very good. I am too. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to be first because I'm going to a baby shower from a former student. So I wanted to kind of ask a couple questions. And the first, I'll just start with what you said about the operations manager. That is a great idea. However, I'm not sure that it's a great use of his time to be the head soccer coach as well. Especially in the beginning, in the fall, there's going to be a lot of conversations about the buildings and not just the junior high. All of them have issues. And for him to be at practice every single day. And then the assistant soccer coach apparently is going to be you. And so we have two sort of administrative positions tied up every afternoon after school. And so that was a bit of a concern that maybe your time and his time might be better used dealing with their job, with the job description, and then hire a soccer coach who's doing soccer. So that's the first question about that.
Okay, so I can address that question. First of all, so Ryan's background, he was a Division I head soccer coach at the University of California, Riverside. He's got a USSFB license, which for those of you that don't know what that means, it's essentially he's near the highest level of licensing you can get in the soccer world in the United States. For me not to leverage him in that position would be foolish. I mean, frankly, we probably have the most qualified soccer coach for our boys of any district in North Idaho and possibly in the whole state of Idaho. And that's not hyperbolic, that's actually probably true. I have actually decided, because of looking at the situation, I'll be helping the boys team, but not daily. Because I actually agree with that. We need to be able to make sure that we're focusing on the core stuff for our district, and so I'll be stepping away. I'll be supporting our team as much as I can, but Mike Fife, who's here, Mike, raise your hand. Mike is going to be the assistant coach. Mike's got a background. He was a semi-professional soccer player as well. So we've got an overpowered soccer coaching staff. And it's pretty phenomenal that our boys have access to such high-level coaching. I would love to do it because I've been a pretty high-level coach myself, but recognizing that too many cooks in the kitchen makes bad stew, we're gonna let those fellas, they know what they're doing. I don't need to be there watching them, micromanaging them. I love being out with the fellas and kicking the ball around, but yeah, we're gonna do that. So that's kind of how we're gonna help mitigate it. And I know Coach Caruth and trust Coach Fife to do what he needs to do when he's around, when he's not available, and we're moving forward that way.
Well, that's great. That's excellent news. Another question that I had, and actually it's a couple of them. I was at the meeting last Monday night when you first were gathering input about the junior high school, and at that time, I know somebody asked you if there was any plans to sell it, and you were adamant that no, there were not. And you talked a lot about, well, we can just turn the thermostat down to 50 in the winter, and that'll prevent it from getting mold and deteriorating further. And so then someone asked you about leasing, and you said, as far as you know, there's nothing in the works about leasing. And that's curious because and I know you weren't here, but the board was last year when the previous superintendent quit in March. It was right after it came out that they were talking about leasing that building to the Albertson Foundation to house a charter school. And so, we hadn't ever heard any more about that from you, so we assumed that also must be a rumor. But then, merely 2 days after that meeting, there was a question on the questionnaire about some in the community have suggested repurposing for another community use. Now, I'm not sure if that would include someone else's charter school. So it was interesting that question came up a mere 2 days later, but you knew nothing about that being a possibility. And so I was curious about that. And then the last question I have is, when you decided to offer the special ed director position remotely, how widely was that advertised as a remote hybrid position, and for how long? before, and who was on the interview committee that chose the woman that you chose?
Sure. So I'll answer the first question first and the last one last, or the second one, or the first one last. So the special education director position was posted on Indeed. We boosted the post so that it got nationwide coverage. We actually got applicants from people outside of the country, but for a lot of obvious reasons, we couldn't entertain them. We had almost over, I want to say over 75 or 80 applicants from throughout the country for that position. So it was a pretty wide swath of people. Some of them, I would say probably a quarter of them were clearly not qualified for the position. About another half were marginally qualified, and then the final quarter were highly qualified, at least on paper, for the role. As far as the hiring committee was concerned, the process that we took was myself and Tracy Arusha, who's been the special education admin assistant for the last several years. We sat through and we put the applications. Basically what I did is if they didn't have at least a master's degree in special ed, they were removed right off the top because they wouldn't have been qualified for a special education certificate, director-specific certificate in the state of Idaho. So we threw all those away right off the top. And then we went through and we independently put the applicants into 3 tiers. And then we went and compared our tiers, and we moved a couple people up and we moved a couple people down. But generally speaking, the top tier we were largely had a lot of overlap on that because it was pretty clear who the best people were. We had the first round, we did 2 rounds of interviews. The first round of interviews was conducted by, the interview panel was Tracy, Lynn Parker, the principal of PRE, who else? There was a couple other people.
Special education teachers.
There wasn't any special education teachers on the first panel. There were on the second
panel. How about
panel.
parents, special education parents?
No, and we don't include parents in any of our hiring decisions anyway. That's not something that to my knowledge has ever been done anyway. So we did have in the second round, we had Mr. George, myself, Tracy again, and Brittany Smith, who's one of the behavioral interventionists, as part of that. And I really wanted to make sure that they led the decision making on that, and so there was near unanimity about who should have been the candidate that was offered the position. The 3 finalists that we had were all great. They all would have been really helpful. I mean, really great people in their own rights. One of them had a degree in psychology, school psychology. That would have been helpful, but her background in SPED wasn't quite where we wanted it to be. Even though she technically had a degree in SPED, she hadn't worked in that world. She'd been mostly in the school psychology space, which is a very different world. So we ended up with Dr. McKnight, and we're really pleased to have her. And then your first question was about, remind me again.
Yeah,
Oh, the question about the junior high. So that question, that questionnaire, like I mentioned, I think, maybe I didn't mention this on Wednesday, that questionnaire was put together by Trustee Brown, and she wanted to get more feedback so she knew what was going on. And I think the reality is I have actually spoken with people in this community, in fact, people that are on staff in this building and other places who have suggested ideas for repurposing the junior high. Some of them have suggested that it become a museum because it is a historical building, that we use it for the museum for the community, that we use it as a community center so that the city could purchase it and use it as a community center. Those sorts of things. There's been a lot of different things that have been talked about, and I'm sure there's things that have been talked about that I haven't been privy to, but those are a couple examples of what.
Have you been aware at all about the idea of leasing it to a charter school and the Albertson Foundation, or are we just all hearing those rumors out of thin air?
So I'll say this: I try to stay out of the rumor mill here.
Right, you do. So.
And I do that intentionally because I don't want to get caught up in it. I've got too much to do. I mean, sure, I've heard passing that there's this idea, but I've never really given it.
So no board member has ever spoken to you about that? Keith has never mentioned it? No one
Sure,
has never
yes, he has.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not something that, it's just like anything else. Like I've had other board members ask me about making it a museum. Like, until there's a community buy-in, like there's really not, we have to get to where we are, so.
Okay, and so you didn't mention any of those things Monday night just because it was still speculative?
Right. Monday nights, the purpose of Monday night's meeting was to collect feedback.
But you talked a lot at that meeting though too, and gave us a ton of background about how it would be nearly impossible to get the junior high working because I believe you said that if anything we did to it, we would have to bring the entire building up to current code.
Well, if we touch the structural.
Right, but you didn't say that at the time because the main issue seemed to be whether the boiler was going to fail or not, and so that's why I'm kind of curious why that didn't come up. There wasn't a lot of detail about what was wrong or any of that. It didn't look like much research had been done. And yet, then when it came to the plan for combining one hallway in the high school and a couple portables and so forth, there was a great detailed plan, which makes, I'm sure, people feel a little bit like, the intent was to make the one option seem completely not viable, but here we figured out this other option. And so that just it doesn't feel real.
Yeah, so
straightforward, I guess.
I can't help where people draw their conclusions to. That's not, I don't own other people's thought processes. What I can tell you is that we were being diligent. We wanted to make sure that if the community was supportive of doing something, that we had the logistical components in place so that we could. Because I think that if we hadn't done that, I think it would have been a really poor showing by us as a district to say, here's what we should do. Well, how are we going to do that? I don't know. Well, I had to have an I know, because I needed to be able to say with some level of specificity around what was going to happen.
And that absolutely makes sense. The same level of specificity should be presented about what we could do about the junior high in the short term with the minimum that we need to do, and then also to be discussing, rather than at the end of the meeting, at the beginning, that there was going to be facilities money coming in, since we don't have a pay down on a bond or a levy, and that money can be used for that. We didn't hear about that till the very end of the meeting. Okay, thank you.
Morning, Branden. Hi. First of all, I want to thank you for doing this. I want to welcome you to our school district, and I applaud your perseverance with the challenges of a new superintendent. You've been doing a great job. That being said, I have a question about this certification process. I'm not a parent. You might be able to tell I don't have school-age kids. But I am a resident of the school district and a taxpayer of the school district, and I'm reading the Bee every day. Was it Caroline? 19-year subscriber as of last month. But I'm reading the Bee every day, and quite a few articles, and it'll say, well, the school board says that you haven't applied yet for this emergency certificate, I guess it's called. And then there's a comment from the state school that says, no, that's not right. And I'm watching it going back and forth, and it's like watching a tennis game. I'm watching the ball get lobbed back and forth. Can you please, for the average layman, please explain what is this certificate all about? What's happening? Anyway, just give us your version of it, please.
Sure, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I think, with all due respect to our friends in the press, they don't do the greatest job communicating things that are happening. And so one of the issues that we have is, so we have, the statute is crystal clear on what has to have happened before a provisional certificate application is submitted to the state. And the statute clearly says that the board must declare an emergency. Everywhere else in Idaho statute where a board, whether it be a local school board or a county commissioner or some other taxing entity that has a board, fire district, whatever it is, everywhere else in statute, that implicates the requirement of a board to take an affirmative action where they as a board vote to do something. That didn't happen with my predecessor. That didn't happen, and yet an application was submitted without that. It is the case that our previous chair, or that our current chair has signed off on a document because the previous staff told him he had to sign this thing and get it taken care of. That is the case. But he doesn't have the authority to represent the board in that sort of situation unless the board gives him specific authorization. I can give you an example. So the board previously voted to authorize Chair Rutledge to choose legal counsel. That was a vote of the board. The board empowered him to do that. He then made that decision unilaterally with the support of the board's vote. He did not have that authority to sign a document to apply to sign for an emergency provisional certificate application. He wasn't given that authority. So our contention, and at the same time while that was going on, we were hearing from the State Board of Education that their deputy director had indicated that it was his position that the district could not have two superintendents have a provisional certificate at the same time. That was his position. At least that's what we were hearing. And we took that at face value. And so we asked the state board through, with the advice and consent of our district attorney to rescind that application, that approved application. They came back and took them 6 pages to basically say, we can do what we want. And to basically say that if we can decide if your board is declared an emergency or not. Now let me tell you about the constitutional crisis that creates, because that's really what this is about. The constitutional crisis is now an unelected board who is appointed by the governor in the executive branch can tell any board in the state of Idaho whether or not they've done something or not, even if they haven't done it. And that is much bigger than, frankly, my application or anything else. That is a constitutional problem that we've got, because there, in no way, shape, or form does the State Board of Education have the authority, and nowhere else in the executive branch do they have the authority to dictate to locally elected boards what they have or have not done unless they've actually done it. That is part of the issue. So now where we are is, given the guidance that we have from the State Board of Education and what we've heard from their staff, the current interim, the previous interim superintendent, her provisional certificate, whether it was, was supposed to be approved or not, is still in effect, according to the state board, until August 30th. That is the date in which it expires. That means that if I were to apply before the end of that date, it would, based off of the interpretation of the state board, ostensibly give them the authority to reject the application out of hand. So what am I to do? I hear a lot of people say, you need to apply for your application, you need to apply for your application, get it done right now, get it done right now. Number one, there's no deadline in my contract that says I have to apply by a certain date. It does require me to do my due diligence and to continue to proceed on that process, which I am doing. We found out that our attorney for our district had planned travel. He's been on a cruise in the Baltic Sea for several days. We're not going to proceed without his guidance, and I think it wouldn't be prudent for us to do so. And so when he returns back to the country and is ready to work, which we're hoping is Monday, we will get an opinion from him. We'll decide if we want to proceed with further legal action against the state in conjunction with the Attorney General's office, who's already shown a willingness to take on state agencies when they're doing things that are illegal and unconstitutional. Thank goodness. And we will do what we need to do. All that to say, if nothing else transpires and the state board doesn't rescind its previous guidance, based off of its most recent guidance, we will wait until August 31st, and then we'll apply as required, because then we'll have certainty that we have met the requirement based off of their interpretation of the law. So,
Great.
Does that answer your question?
I look forward to the day when I can pick up the bee and say, this is a done deal, he's got a certificate, and we can put that one to bed. Thank you.
Hi, Kylie. I'm kind of going to go a little bit off of what he said.
Sure.
So you're going to wait to do this application until August 30th. Is that correct? After August 30th or 31st?
We're going to wait until the state board no longer has a rational basis from their perspective to deny an application out of hand.
Okay.
So that could be the 31st if they don't rescind their previous action, correct?
Okay. So with that being said, if you do not get this provisional certificate, then your wage comes out of the general fund. Is that correct?
Yes.
Have you worked that into the budget?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Maureen Patterson. I want to thank you again, Superintendent Hurst. Can you, like this? Okay. Oh my goodness. I want to thank you again for standing firm in the storm. I also had heard a little bit about the math department and was wondering if you could clarify what that was.
Sure. The high school level, you mean, Maureen?
Yes.
Okay. So our high school math department is going to be brand new this year. We had several applicants for that role. We had 3 open positions, and we'd actually hired all 3. The third offered candidate decided to stay down in southern Idaho with his family, and his family just, they didn't have quite enough time to move up here. But the other 2, one of them is her name is Nicole Anderson, and she is the former department chair at Columbia High School in the Nampa School District. She's got a master's degree in math education, just a home run hire, frankly, for the district. And we're really, really, really lucky that she decided to apply to our district. In fact, I asked her on more than one occasion, "Are you sure you want to work here?" Because she could get hired at any district in the Panhandle if she wanted to. And she knows that, but she wants to do something for this district, and so we appreciate that. She's already moved up to Sandpoint. That's where she's going to be living, and so we're really lucky to have her. Another gentleman that we hired, I just met him yesterday, actually. He moved up from Sacramento. He was a community college instructor. He taught college level math. He has some background in K-12 as well, as far as I recall, but don't quote me on that. Well, you might probably will anyways, because that's what Meady does. But I don't know if.
You didn't know your information.
But I don't know for sure. I don't.
That's 9 more. Yeah,
That's
unnecessary.
It's okay, continue.
Yeah. So.
That's 2.
So anyway, we have those 2 folks, and I believe that that Mr. George already had a third candidate that he hadn't offered to before, that he kind of had as a backup, and that person, I believe, has accepted the position already, but I'm not, there's a lot going on, so I'm not 100% sure about that. So we're going to have a really great math department this next year, and I think plus with our instructional coaches and our curriculum director with an emphasis in math, I really expect to see good things out of our math team.
What was the second guy's name? Did you say it?
I don't, Clark Oven, I think is his name, but I'm not, I met him yesterday, but I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm sorry? Oliver, yes. Yeah, you're right. Yes.
Hello. I'm confused with the 3 athletic directors. Could you? I'm confused with the 3 athletic directors. Could you please explain the role of each of them and why you believe we need more than 1 for the high school and 1 for the junior high?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So when we look at division of labor, I believe strongly in specialization of tasks, right? So first thing to take into consideration, this isn't costing the district even 1 penny more than we've been previously paying. That's the first thing to take to keep in mind. This isn't costing us more. What we're doing is we're saying, hey, we've got 3 people who all have unique strengths, and we're going to leverage those strengths so that we can improve our experience for our kids and for our community. So we have a head athletic director who's really the vision leader, the thought leader, the athletic leader for our district. He's going to be in charge of coach education, in charge of working with peer athletic departments, who's going to be working on all the IHSAA things, all those kind of higher level type operations. And then within the high school and the junior high, they're going to have people who are committed to just doing their school's sports. So, the junior high school AD, who is Angie Goins, who's been in that role for I don't know how long, a while, I guess. She's going to continue to make sure she's, making sure the logistical pieces of that program are completed in conjunction with our athletic department assistant. And the same thing is going to be true with Alex Zepeda, who's our new high school AD. He'll be working in the same kind of role. The hiring of coaches will ultimately be decided by the head AD with consent and advisement from those 2 others, depending upon which level the coach is going to be coaching at. But this is really a way of trying to divide the labor, so not what happens, unfortunately, is people that get involved with sports love sports, and that's great. We want them to. But when you love sports, you can allow it to kind of take a little bit more of your attention than it needs to or it should. And so by dividing the labor, we're trying to make sure that they don't have as much to think about so they can focus on other tasks that they may have to work on.
Can you tell me if any of the people that are taking these roles have administrative credentials? Because it was my understanding that you had to have someone who had administrative credentials when you went to things like the state tournaments.
So last year's AD, Chris Taylor, did not have a educational admin degree. So that isn't the case. However, it is the case that Ryan does. He does have his education, his master's degree in educational administration. Okay. So that is a win. He hasn't taught in the K-12 level, so he's not eligible for a certificate, but he's gone through the training. He's ran athletic programs at the collegiate level, so I feel pretty comfortable with him being able to handle a high school budget.
So he doesn't have a certificate, though?
He doesn't have a certificate. He has a degree, but neither did the previous AD either. So.
At the Priest Lake Town Hall meeting, you stated that special need kids were the problem for our district with their test scores. How do you plan on bringing our 504 and IEP students' test scores up with a special needs director that will be working remotely, especially with only one counselor for our whole district?
So, I think that what I said is being mischaracterized, and I want to.
I do get what you were trying to say. I do get it.
I mean, the reality is that students who tend to not test as well have an impact on our overall test scores for our district.
I get what you
And and as a parent who has children on a 504 and has had children on IEPs, like, I recognize that my oldest son, when it came down to the end of the day, he was a drag on his school's test scores. That is just a fact. And it doesn't mean I love him any less than the rest of my kids. It's just, that's a practical reality of his impact on me. Like, that is how it is. But what we're looking at is we are actually trying to hire a second counselor for the district. That's number one. We're trying to hire an elementary level position. We're actively recruiting for that role. In addition, and this I think will be on the agenda for the regular meeting on Wednesday, is to have the budgetary authority to hire a mental health professional to work on a contract basis with our schools, so that way we don't have to worry about them being certificated as an educator, but being able to at least, really being able to provide mental health support and being able to do that district-wide. So that's another piece that we're working on. As it relates to the remote position, the district was really just we were at a decision point. We left the position open for special ed locally. We left it open until the day that Dr. McKnight signed her contract. We didn't get a single applicant, and that was over the course of, I think it was close to 6 weeks. Not a single applicant that entire time. And like I've already stated, we have to have somebody in that role. We have to. And it's not something where we can do a forced transfer with an administrator, because none of the administrators in this district have a degree in special ed, which is required by IDEA, which is the federal law that kind of helps regulate special education. We didn't have anybody in the district that met that requirement, nobody. And so when I was down in Boise for a conference, I spoke with some other local smaller districts, and they're all feeling the same crunch. And the same crunch is happening with counselors, it's happening with sped directors, it's happening with personal care nurses, and also paraprofessionals that work with children with high needs. Like those experiences are almost ubiquitous in our state for small school districts.
I guess my question more so was what is her plan, since she will be working remotely and isn't going to be one-on-one with, my son necessarily won't need one-on-one in person, but I guarantee there are other kids who would need that physical interaction.
Yeah, so that's a really fair question. So before we posted this as a hybrid remote, so I want to make sure, and I know you're not saying this, but just to kind of help clarify, because there is a practical distinction between completely remote and hybrid remote, right? Like, a completely remote position would mean they never come to the district. there is a difference. We are saying they had to be able to be available within 6 hours. They had to be able to be to Idaho, or at least be on a plane to Idaho, and then they had to be able to be here at least one week a quarter. That wasn't a difference. But to go back to the larger question you're asking, before we posted this as a hybrid remote position, I asked Tracy, because she's the one that's been doing a lot of the paperwork for this stuff, for these kids. I said, do you think this would work, Tracy? Because I think you know better than I do. You've been here, you know what's going on. She said, yeah. She said, you know, really, I feel like that would work because, you know, Kim didn't really go into the buildings a lot herself anyways, so what's the difference? And she said, you know, we have to have somebody. So,
I've met Kim though on 2 occasions up at Priest Lake.
good. So,
She was in the building.
but not every day.
No,
Right. So,
not at Priest Lake anyway.
yeah. So the point is that we had to do something, and we have our resource room teachers that provide that sort of for students that are eligible for one-on-one care. We you know are actively recruiting more of them, but that's really where that one-on-one attention comes from. A SPED director is not supposed to serve the role of a teacher. That's not their job, and so you know it's the same thing is true of our building administrators. It's true of me. We're not supposed to be in classrooms. You know, the building administrators, I'd like them to do regular walkthroughs, but and I know that they try, but ultimately, you know, we have to look at what the actual responsibility of the position is, and how they can best do that role and have somebody who's highly qualified. So.
I was at the last meeting that you did, and my question was where are you with the curriculum committee that you were taking applications for?
Yeah.
So that's the first part of my question.
So the curriculum committee was adopted by the board on Wednesday.
Okay. And when the applicants for those people, are they looking at more than one curriculum to contrast and compare for needs of the district?
I don't actually know. That's the responsibility of the curriculum director to decide how she wants to proceed with that. I would suspect she probably will, but ultimately that's her decision as the chair of that group.
So how can you compare things of curriculums and how they might best fit the district if you don't, I'm not saying that she won't, but if they don't look at more than one curriculum?
I suspect they will, but again, I don't want to. I believe you have to let people when they have a responsibility, you let them own that responsibility. Her responsibility is to chair that committee. Her responsibility is to help guide that committee. And I'm not going to step in and say, well, this is what she should be doing, because that would be super inappropriate from my perspective to do that. She's going to get to make that decision. I hired her because she's a highly qualified professional, and I will leave it to her discretion as to how she wants to run that meeting.
So then are you aware if they're going to adopt any curriculum prior to school starting?
I don't know. I don't know what her timeline is.
Because my concern is for the staff, that there's time for them to be trained and be competent in a curriculum that's being adopted. And I would hope that you're not looking at adopting something in the next few weeks when staff doesn't have adequate time to be trained.
Yeah, I have told, I can just to share what I have told Peggy and I've told others is I want this done as expeditiously as we can, because I don't want to go through another school year where we don't have curriculum. We do have a 4-day school week coming this year, and as a result, one Friday a month, our teachers will be available for professional development. I would like us to have this done before the end of September at the latest. But again, I'm not going to force a process, but that would be my preference. So that way we can utilize that professional development day to start integrating those things. And we can do a slow rollout, but it needs to start sooner than later, because we won't have a good break until, you know, really for the rest, there isn't a good time to stop, because even over Christmas break, teachers aren't on contract. We can't force them to do professional development during that time. And so, you know, it's going to have to happen mid-year in some way during school year. But when that's going to happen, that's up to the discretion of our curriculum director.
Okay, and then my very last just comment is, I love that everybody's being really respectful, which is what you had asked at the beginning, but I just wish that you would do the same because you've taken some pretty cheap shots at the press.
Well, I'm not gonna apologize and take cheap shots at the press when they don't call and ask me for my opinion or they misrepresent what I've said. So the press gets what they give. I'm not gonna apologize for that.
I just want a little bit of follow-up on the special ed thing. You said before the last gal came up and asked her questions, you said that when the gal from Texas comes, she will come at least for a week per quarter, you thought, and that so she'll be there to do IEPs then. But my understanding of IEPs is that they're done yearly and they come due on different dates. You get referrals to special ed and then you have testing and then she needs to be at those, and they don't, you can't pack them all into 1 week. That doesn't work for anyone else. So we'll have to navigate that. And the other thing you said is she'll be available on 6 hours notice to come here. And so that, runs into some pretty significant transportation costs. Have they looked at doing IEPs by Zoom or anything like that? Like how's that gonna work? Because they won't all come up at the same week in the quarter.
Yeah, and actually it's good that they don't, and that is because we're going to have to look at when those are gonna come due, and we'll use Tracy's knowledge of that of that current schedule to our advantage to be able to line out when per quarter we can do. Because I've been in a lot of IEP meetings in my life, and there will be students whose IEPs or 504s will come up for review in the first quarter. Those will be the ones that she takes care of. That she wouldn't have time to do them all in 1 week. Literally would not have time unless she was here for 15 hours a day and we did 20-minute reviews, which some of them take. If you've got parents who are great advocates for their kids, those meetings can take a long time because they have a lot to say, which is their right. They're protected to do that. And so that is one of the reasons that we said once per quarter is to be able to allow for those quarterly reviews based off of whichever students' IEPs were coming up for review.
So if someone's IEP was due the 8th of September, and then she came during that week, then she would get all the ones for the rest of the quarter that maybe weren't due until the end of October?
Yes.
And that would happen all at one time.
Correct.
Now, what if the parents' schedules, and they're the most important people to get at those meetings? We've always been very flexible about after school, in the evening, whenever it works for them.
Yeah.
How about, will their needs for when it happens still come first, as they should?
Yeah, for sure. We always want to make sure parents are leading in their children's education. That is something that I've been very consistent on. If a parent can't make an entire week work, that could happen, and then we'll provide them the opportunity to do something over Zoom. And that'll be the alternative to that is we'll probably use Google Meets because that's what the district uses, but we'll provide them some sort of electronic process. If they say, I don't have that option at my home, we'll say come into the office and we'll put everybody together except for Dr. McKnight, and then we'll put her on Zoom so we can do that together. And we'll be flexible with parents to the extent they need us to be to make sure they can advocate for their kids.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you again.
Likewise.
Idaho Code 33512-13, to govern the school district in compliance with state law and rules of the State Board of Education. Sounds like the State Board of Education did apply you with their rule. My concern is, are we really going to violate code and not have you apply? I would think, earlier you said you try to stay out of the rumor pool, yet you said you heard that they weren't going to, that the opinion was for you to wait until Susie's has been reversed. If you did you hear it from the State Board of Education, or who's supplying with that information? Also, I'd like to ask, if you do wait until August 31st to apply, once you hear from your attorney, what agenda will you be on then with the State Board of Education for review of your application? Since I'm under the understanding you'll miss October if you wait that late.
So To the extent that I stay out of the room or I stay outside of the things that don't have a direct impact on me as an employee, certainly I need to be aware. Now, I have asked the state board this question directly, and they refuse to answer it. I have tried. They won't tell me. I've said, what is the date? Well, they said, read the statute. I say, okay, what does it mean? How do you interpret it? Well, that's not for us to decide. That's for your district to decide what that means. Okay. And because I've tried to find out what they mean by that, and they won't tell me. They've actually been very guarded, which probably isn't a surprise to some people, but they've been very guarded on what information they'll tell me about the process. So that's number one. Number two, with regards to the deadline, one of the things if you look at the administrative rule, if you look at the statute, they have a deadline. It's arbitrary. They can choose, if I were to apply on August 31st or September 5th or something like that, they could just as readily roll me in to the October meeting as if they wanted to. That would be their prerogative. It's not like if you don't apply by this date, you cannot. This is the priority deadline. And I would suspect, given that they're tired of getting calls from people throughout the state of Idaho about my provisional certificate, that they would likely choose to add me to that agenda just so that they could deal with it and have it over with.
I would agree. Yeah.
So I think the deadline is a bit, like I said, it's an arbitrary deadline that I suspect, and I can't say for certain because I'm not them, but I would suspect that they will ignore to help get this thing taken care of as soon as the application comes in.
So back to the code. If the code does say that the board can only appoint somebody or hire somebody that has a certification, which you do not, a provisional certification or emergency, either one, and it states that then you need to apply. That is the code. You are currently our superintendent that does not have a provisional certification or emergency provisional certification. Are we not working outside Idaho law?
I don't think so. And if you look at the statute more broadly, Title 33 grants school boards tremendous authority and latitude when it comes to its hiring decisions, and that includes with the superintendent. And a lot of what you look at, if you look at the administrative rule, when it relates to endorsements and certifications for any number of certificated endorsed positions, there really isn't a statutory nexus for almost anything they're trying to do. They have created law, which the rule is law. They've created law out of thin air. And so we have spoken with attorneys who don't interpret respectfully, that don't interpret that language to mean what you're suggesting that it means, and have said that the board has the authority to hire whoever it wants to. Now, what the state board can do in response is they can withhold funds. They do have the statutory authority to do that. They can't tell a board who they can and cannot hire.
And I agree. I've had several conversations with them. And actually, with the code, you're correct. With the availability of board to do whatever they want, that's correct. And their only resource is to withhold funds from the district. So I would ask, or just maybe point out, that a district that failed a levy, that 30, 50%, I don't even know how much of wages is on that levy. It's a lot. And we're not going to get funding to support you. How is that fiscally responsible for a board to hire you and continue to pay you when we're not getting funded from the state? I would urge you to apply immediately. Also, when I looked at Susie Lucky's application, there was actually dates when she started and when she ended. Why can't you apply and say that date starts August 31st and ends at the end of whenever you meet the qualifications to actually get your certification? I guess I don't understand why you're not doing that.
That's fair. I would just point out that centralized governments, whether it be the federal government or the state government, regularly utilize money as a chain to tell local people what to do. And it's the same way that we're looking at the Biden administration's rules around transgender policies and saying, if you don't do this on Title IX interpretations, then we're not going to give you money. And I think in the same way that local communities need to reject those sorts of bullying tactics, the school district also needs to reject bullying tactics when it comes from the state, who's trying to force its way into what we can and cannot do. And that's just my personal opinion.
One note here, I think you want to die on this hill, and I think you want to fight the State Board of Education with regards to your certification. I can tell you as a taxpayer, I do not support this fight. I would support a fight dying on the hill with the legislature to fully fund education. And if you want to use our tax dollars for that, I'm all for it. But to use our tax dollars to fight for you not being certified, I think that most of us in this room would agree we want those tax dollars to go to benefit our teachers and our students, not your certification. Please don't die on that hill. Fill out the application. If you are the best candidate and the best superintendent, just go for it.
I just want to clarify that K through 6th grade, we do have a curriculum that we can fall back on. We did it last year when the board rescinded our reading curriculum at the last minute. So we do have something we can fall back on. And I think a concern, well, I've heard through a lot of these meetings, people have asked you to slow down on things. And I feel with the reading curriculum and what's happening there, a concern I have is there is not one special ed representative on the new curriculum or Title I. Why not?
You'd have to ask Trustee Barton and Trustee Brown. They were the ones who selected those members.
So you talk about Peggy Lutzenheiser being the new curriculum director. Why was she not given the role to decide who's on the team?
Because ultimately this was a board decision.
Is that really what's best for kids, though?
Well, it's the process that we have so. I guess the alternative is we could be run by technocrats, but I don't want to live in a world like that.
He's not a technocrat. He was educated.
Yes.
A little background, I am a retired teacher. Both of our kids went through this school district and graduated from college, got advanced degrees. Okay, I thought I still had my teacher voice, I guess not. But our kids had great teachers, like Mr. Caldwell, glad he's still here. And my son has gone on to become a teacher. He's taught in the Coeur d'Alene district for 8 years now. So my question is about the qualifications of the teachers that you are hiring. We've heard that there were 30 vacancies originally, or somewhere in that neighborhood of certificated teachers. I think you gave a comment one time that you would hire anyone who had attended college for 2 years. Now that you're in the thick of the hiring process and coming to a close with it, I was glad to hear of the qualifications of your new math director. How many of those new teachers hold current valid teaching certificates?
I appreciate your question. Thanks for being a service to the district. I would say that we didn't have 30 certificated positions open. That might have included all classified staff, but that wasn't for all certificated positions. Last check, 95% plus of our applicants were fully certificated educators. I think we have 2 alternate tracks at the elementary level, and that's it.
That sounds good.
So I heard there was going to be biscuits and gravy. Is that still happening?
Yeah, we're on it.
No, I got a question that might have already been answered, but with the problems that the levy failing caused, did that $1 million you found fix all of that?
So we're, so here's where we are with that issue. One of the things that's been very difficult for our staff, in accounting we call them, they're called breadcrumbs. You look at, how things were put together before. And the problem is the breadcrumbs don't exist, at least not where we can find them. And so understanding how previous budgets were put together has become very, very, very difficult. And that's been all the more complicated by how levy funds were spent. So we have spent the last week and a half plus trying to decipher where when levy funds came in, and then how they were appropriated and then ultimately spent. Because what I have yet to be able to fully ascertain is, if you look at, for example, on our 4-year budgets, right? You'll see our detailed, our summary reports that says what that last year's budgets were for different things. What we have yet to be able to fully conclude, and again, this goes back to the lack of breadcrumbs that were left, is if staff previously had put a number in the local revenue line item, if that was anticipated revenue or if that was received revenue. And that's a big difference, because if that's anticipated revenue, then what it's saying is the board had been budgeting, had been leveraging a budget protocol where they were appropriating funds to be spent before the money had been collected. Now, that would be a really bad idea, and most people understand in government and public budgeting, you don't do it like that. You don't spend the money until you've received it. And I can tell you through my public budgeting coursework at the graduate level and my previous experience doing public budgeting, that's how we do it. So if you look at how the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee conducts their budgeting process for the state, they say, this is what we have received, and now we can spend it. And the same thing is true for most public agencies in the state of Idaho. My initial assumption was that's how the West Bonner County School District did it. They received money, and they said, okay, now we can spend it. The problem is, we can't tell if that's actually true or not. It could be the case that we said, like I've already stated, we said this is how much we expect to receive throughout the year, and we're going to appropriate that. If that happens, then that money isn't new. It's already been given a name, and it's already been appropriated. And so we are trying to backwards engineer the last 5 years of budgets to figure out if that is the case. And so in fact, I've got our budget manager is at the office right now, and she's working on that very thing, because we have to know the answer to that question before we proceed with the revised budget.
Okay, just a quick comment.
Sure.
You know, I've heard you 3 different times make comments about the press. Every single time, up to including today, you've said, with all due respect. You know, so that's not a cheap shot, in my opinion. That's not an attack. That is you making your opinion known. So I don't think you're cheap shotting anybody. So anyway, thanks.
Just real quick, on the last meeting, you said there were 4 bank accounts on the line items in the district, but when you went to the bank, there was 5 accounts, and you were going to look into what that whole 5th account was. Do we know what that, or if we figured that out?
Yeah, so some point in the last, I guess, again, I haven't been as intimately involved with this because it goes back to what I was previously saying. I have good people that are supposed to know what they're doing. I trust them to do their jobs, and so I don't micromanage them. So with that caveat, my understanding is at some point in the last year or so, a 5th account was created, and it's called a sweep account that goes through and goes to a 0 balance every night. Things are deducted out, and then another account goes and collateralizes that account and takes money through. So there are other things that we're looking into right now with some other potential accounts that wouldn't be monetized within the district, but maybe the district is utilizing to expend funds. But again, I don't want to get too far into that because I don't want to poison the process for the forensic audit, and I want to make sure that they have the opportunity to do their job without our muddying the waters.
I have 2 more questions, but I'm more than happy to let somebody else ask one if they want to. My first question is, do we have a counselor for the high school? Yes or no?
We have a counselor in district who is willing to take a transfer to the high school.
Was that a yes?
We will have a counselor at the high school, yes.
My next, I guess it's kind of a comment, kind of a question. August 25th is fast approaching. Are you confident that all the employees will be paid in their chosen manner and on time?
Yes.
I hope so.
Me too. Just so everybody knows, I haven't gotten paid yet. Not once. So, you know, if anybody wants to get, well, I got a $2,000 stipend returned, and that's because that was a different process, but I haven't been paid otherwise. So, you know, a lot of people I appreciate people want to make sure they get paid on time. I still have yet to get paid. And I haven't had a paycheck since the middle of June, and my wife also lost her job at that same time. So we are intimately interested in making sure that that gets taken care of. But there are processes we have to go through. Here's part, just to kind of better answer that part of that question, here's part of the dilemma we've got. You can't close out a budget for a fiscal year until all the bills are paid for that fiscal year. We have found bills that were due in February of this year in the district office. We owed almost $10,000 to Verizon that had accumulated throughout the entire year that we hadn't paid. So those things have a direct impact on our ability to roll over a budget to a new fiscal year and then make payroll. Because we can't do that. Because if we roll it over and then we have to step back and then roll over again, it becomes very messy in the budgeting. And it will be an audit finding. I mean, we already know that. It will be an audit finding because we've had to do that once already to make sure that some custodial staff got paid this month, or last month. We had to do that because they're hourly employees, and so what they get paid is for the current fiscal year, not from the previous fiscal year. But that has been the dilemma we've had. We keep finding bills that were due that should have been paid in the prior fiscal year, but for some reason they were put aside and never dealt with. So,
who is in charge of paying the bills?
ultimately, well, we look at this from a hierarchy standpoint. Ultimately, it's my responsibility, and then it goes down to our finance team, and they're the ones to operationalize that.
So for the bills that haven't been paid since February, who's responsible for that?
So again, I don't know how I don't want to speak to how other administrators or superintendents ran their shops. I can tell you for us, what we do is we say, ultimately, if it's the Jimmy Carter thing, the buck stops here thing, like that's true. That's my responsibility ultimately for all those things. But we hire good people that can do their job so they can get those done efficiently.
So I don't understand why you wouldn't just pay the bill and then leave it in the past. I'm not sure what this has to do, why that's even relevant.
Because because we have a requirement in this district to have bills approved before they're paid by our school board. And we have to have them approve it first, so we can't just write a check. We have to say, hey, here's the bill, and that's part of public transparency so that you all know those bills exist.
So basically, the school board has control over when those things are paid, correct?
Ultimately, they are the fiduciary agent for the district.
Okay, so.
My next question is, for the $1 million that was levy money, won't the forensic audit be able to tell you where that money came from?
I hope they help shed light on some of that, yes. That would be...
Isn't that what the forensic audit, we're hoping to bring everything into light? So if it doesn't bring things to light that we need to know, then what's the point?
So there's a difference between a forensic audit and a financial audit.
Okay.
And I think that there might be some confusion between those terms. The forensic audit is looking at, so a financial audit, which we do annually as required by the state, that says you had X amount of revenue, you had a Y amount of expenditures. Do those numbers match in the proper budgeting categories? That's the end of the analysis, right? A forensic audit, on the other hand, will say you had X number of expenditures, Y number, or X number of revenue, Y number of expenditures, but then you said you were going to spend this on this. Did that actually transpire? Or was this actually spent on this instead? So they're going to look in at a detailed level to see whether or not things were spent on the things they were supposed to be spent on. Now, I want to make sure that we're all crystal clear on what's happening. The preliminary report that we're going to get on August 25th from Ide Bailey is going to be a kind of a heat check of sorts. It's going to say, Is there something that we should look into further? My guess is they're going to say yes, because there are things that, even for me, I look at them and I'm like, this doesn't quite make sense. And I suspect they're going to recommend that we complete phases 2 and 3 of our audit, which we'll get into more detail. That'll take till October to finalize. And that's the timeline they presented to us and that the board adopted. So the point is, we need to make sure that people who have no vested interest in the financial outcomes of this district are doing an objective analysis to ensure that going forward, our taxpayers can have confidence that the money that they give to us is spent the way that it was intended.
Wants. So when Susan Brown made that video that said she found $1 million, that wasn't actually really true, was that? That was money that was talked about weeks prior with Jared Hughes at the negotiations meeting. It was spoke of, I think Kathy Nash brought it up months prior to that. So that wasn't actually money that she found, is that correct?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Debbie Butry explained it very well.
Yes, she did.
She's an arts hand.
How come you don't know?
Because we don't know where that money is, what the source of, we know what the source of that money is. We don't know if that money has already been, as I've already stated, we don't know if that money has already been budgeted by the prior.
Was it known about before, or did she actually find it?
So we found a revenue source that we had not anticipated in our current budget, based off of how the prior budget had been explained to me. I don't know.
So when you keep saying you don't know, what will it take for you to know and be able to give an answer about that?
When we have that process completed with our levy, like I already mentioned, Melissa's down at the district office right now. She's crunching numbers. We're working with.
So you're pretty confident that you will be able to tell that?
At some point, we will know. Yes, we have to. If we don't know, then we have a budget that will never be. It would be creating a budgeting process by which we never actually know where our floor is, because we wouldn't know how much money we have to spend in truth. And we are committing a lot of resources and time to getting down to the brass tacks so we know exactly where those numbers are.
Good.
My name is Todd Sudik, and I was a former county commissioner, but I'd like to put forensic audits in perspective. The previous commissioner prior to me was going after money that was not accounted for. And his wife is a forensic auditor. In his term, he found $7.5 million that was misappropriated. But I got in there and I started combing the budget with a fine-tooth comb. And I'm not a forensic auditor. And after about 3 weeks, I found $9.6 million that had been squirreled away in a bond account in Boise by a previous clerk. Now, audits are good tools for whether it's a school board or the commissioners. The problem with finding money is that was not money that was available on the L2 for the commissioners to spend. So it's actually a felony because it was submitted to the state inappropriately. So you can have a forensic audit, you can have a regular financial audit, and things are could still not be where they need to be in terms of where's the money. Now, I'd like to bring up one other point. I disagree with you on anticipated income, and I voiced that the other day. In the county, we got funds after the budget was approved from the federal government, for instance, and from the state. So if the budget's approved in August and we don't actually get a check until September, what do? Well, you can now reopen the budget and you can call it unanticipated income, but really it's anticipated income. So what do? we put that amount in where it would normally be as anticipated income, and we made a guess based on previous years as to how much we're going to get, but it shows in the budget. Now, we're not going to spend it until we get it, but it shows in the budget. And I think that's the way it should be done. And that makes it clear to the public exactly where the funds are coming from and when. So I disagree that you leave it out of the budget. I think it can be anticipated income, and you just don't spend it until you get it.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly that's a budgeting process you can take. Here's an example. We know we're getting money from the state of Idaho for facilities as a result of House Bill 292. We know that's going to happen. That is a certainty. We don't know what that number is going to be because it seems to continually be a moving target as to how much they've appropriated and how they're going to assess enrollments to create the divisor for that amount. Because the school board has the authority through statute to, just as a county commission would have, to revise its budget at any time, from a fiscal responsibilities perspective, I would rather wait until the money is there and then revise the budget accordingly. And I get that there are. I go grab my public budgeting book I had from my master's program. There are different ways of doing this, right? I get that. I prefer to not even budget money until I know for a fact that it's in my hand. That is my preference, and I get, because we can. It would be different if it's different, like at the legislative level, at the state level, right, where they can't come in and revise their budget whenever they want, right, because they're out of session. They can't just come back in and say, okay, the fiscal year 24 budget needs to be revised because our tax collections for the June period weren't where we expected them to be, because they're typically setting their budget in April, or they're setting their budget number in January, right? So they have to anticipate some revenue that's going to come in. And in very rare circumstances, they do a revision to that. We don't have that same barrier to revision. And so because we have more flexibility, it would be my preference from a budgeting standpoint to wait until money is in hand and then adjust accordingly.
But from the transparency point of view, and that seems to be an issue with the public, from a transparency point of view, it shows up 4 or 5 months later, everybody says, well, where did this money come from? How come it wasn't budgeted? I think what really needs to happen is that you put it as a placeholder, as anticipated income under whatever part of the budget it's going to come to. And then you don't spend it until you get it. But you can come pretty close, even if it's 80% of what you think you're going to get. At least it's there. And then when the real amount comes in, you add to it. But I think from a transparency, if I'm looking at the budget, and I was combing over the budget yesterday, you have things in there that say, in one section it says, it was moved from somewhere. Where is it moved from? $150,000. That's not transparent.
And I agree. Our current budget is not great, and I've said that on many occasions. Like I don't like our current budget the way that it's written. That's why we're going to have to do a revision. But we had to legally meet deadlines, which we had to rush. So.
I think for the transparency issue, that's what you do.
Yeah.
Placeholder, anticipated income, put an amount in there. We did it all the time because our federal funds or state funds came in after the budget was.
I think part of this, and I appreciate that, but respectfully, part of the dilemma we have is a vast majority of the budget in a school district is for personnel. And when we sign a negotiated agreement, for example, we're attesting that we will pay this amount of money. If money doesn't show up, the district is still obligated because of that attestation and through that negotiated agreement to make those payments. That's the dilemma that I see. If we were only talking about capital projects, for example, or other kind of non-personnel operational type things, I would be much more comfortable with that.
Facilities money.
Right, facility stuff, for example. I have no problem with that because we're not going to write the check for the facilities until we have the money in hand, but we're not signing a contract to do a renovation until we have the money in hand. Right. Yes. Yes, we are. Sometime before the August 31st, according to the statute.
Let me get a check. You can put a number in there on the short term as a line item, as anticipated income. You can do that.
Yes.
It's perfectly legal.
Totally legal.
At least the public sees it. And at least they have an idea about where the money's coming from.
And I don't disagree. What I'm saying is, when we're talking about facilities expenditures, I'm much more comfortable doing that because at the end of the day, we don't sign a contract with a vendor, whether it be a electrical contractor or somebody else, until the money actually shows up. But I have a lot more concern about doing that when things relate to personnel because we are, like I just said, we're already obligating ourselves to those funds even if they don't show up.
We had 780 employees in the county, so we paid police. And we still created the budget based on anticipated.
Okay. Like
I don't buy your argument.
well, it's a different approach.
This is an indication of waiting.
Sure. Yeah.
So far, fiscal year to date, how much have you received from the levy from the county?
We've received one levy payment of $869,000.
What do you have in accounts receivable from the levy from past years?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
The other question is, did any of the levy money show up in accounts receivable prior to your finding it through your financial people?
Some yes, and some we're not sure. So it's kind of again, it may seem pretty simple, and it really should be a very simple proposition, but it has gotten unnecessarily complicated. What we should have been doing is we received funds, because every time you receive a check from the county, it stipulates which levy is being paid out and at what rates, at what amounts, right? It'll say X number of thousands of dollars for the 2019 levy, X number of thousands of dollars for the 2020 levy, and it goes through that. We have yet to be able to find documentation that's had that on an accruing basis to aggregate that number to where it should be to its finalization, to its endpoint. So for example, I believe it was the 2020 levy was exactly $3 million, right? We should have been able to accrue all that together and say, when we get to $3 million, that levy has been exhausted, all the obligation for that levy has been met, and we can move on. We don't have that documentation available to us, at least not that we've found yet. And we've spent a lot of hours using different keywords and searching with different things to find those documents, because there's a lot of stuff in our file server, a lot of financial documentation, as you might imagine, because it's a district that's been around for a while. Most of the stuff has been on the file server, but we don't have that all figured out yet. We are, myself and Trustee Hall and Melissa, we have been doing a lot of work to try to figure out where those numbers are, but we just don't have a level of certainty yet that allows us to be able to step in and say, this is exactly what we've got, this is how much we've got remaining. We know that according to the county, for example, we have $150,000 outstanding yet to be paid. So that's where we are.
So is that back taxes that haven't been paid?
Those are unpaid taxes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. And I think like $3 are from 2019, and the rest, most of them are from sooner.
Get a line from the county, get a line from the county, and show everything that was paid by the county over the last year. Why don't you run parallel columns and figure it out from there?
We have been doing that. We're collecting all the previous checks that have come in. They're supposed to be sending us a report every month. That documentation hasn't been retained that we can find, because this really shouldn't be hard. We should be able to go in and say, in March of 2023, we received X amount of dollars from this levy. We have a tort levy still. We still receive funds from those, which I didn't answer that part of the question because you didn't really ask. But we do get a tort levy every single, I don't know the frequency on that quite yet, but we get a tort levy fund. It's not a lot of money, but it's something that we need to account for. So, yeah.
She let me take cuts. because it's on topic, sorry. So let's go back. I just want to clarify something from the levies since you were unsure. West Bonner County School District has passed levies since 2000. We get a very large check in August or the beginning of July of every year, and a very large check in January. We also get trickle-down money through the year of taxes collected. This isn't surprise money. And to imply that it hasn't been spent as it's supposed to be is irresponsible and creates division in our community. I think better maybe to say is we've had really good employees and we're trying to follow up on what they've done. The fact that you don't know how it's done does not imply there was anything illegal or fraudulent. It just means that staff left and new staff is there and there wasn't a continuity for training. So let's stop that dialogue, please, Mr. Durst. The other thing I'd like to suggest or question is, and I hate to go back to Susan Brown because this is just information that she provided, but when she did the video saying they found $1 million and you're saying it wasn't in the budget, because it was in the 2022-23 budget, it was not in the 23-24 budget because it's last year's money. Then you're saying that you know money's coming, but you didn't put it in this budget. Will there be a video when we get a check from the state with a ta-da moment saying, oh my God, the board just found a bunch of money? Or will you right now say that was irresponsible to go on video with Casey Whalen here and suggest that prior administration or prior employees are fraudulent?
I want to make sure I never make clear. And I could be corrected. Casey's been recording this, so he could provide the video evidence. But to my knowledge, I haven't accused anyone of doing anything fraudulent. What I've said is there are different ways that you do public budgeting. And the way that I am familiar with it being done, the way that the best practice is done, is you don't budget until, especially when you have a ability to revise your budget, is unless you have a fixed number of dollars, you don't use anticipated revenue. With all due respect, that is the way that I was personally trained on how to do this. This is how I've personally done this. Is it's like my parents always make fun of me. You don't count your chickens till your eggs hatch, right? Like you got eggs, but we don't know what's going to come out of them, right? So we want to make sure that those eggs hatch before we assume that we got a hen out of it.
So it makes sense then that Stacy, that the prior business manager wouldn't have had on the budget because she didn't get that money. If that's what you're saying, the money you just got that money.
What I would say is that we were told that information was knowable in the middle of June.
So you were aware the money was coming in June.
We should have known because that's when the county told me that they anticipated that they were going to be.
So you were aware the money was coming in June?
No, I didn't make the calls. Here's the thing. I go back to what I was saying previously. I rely upon staff to do what they're supposed to do. So I don't feel like it's a good use of my time to second guess what people are trying to do. I rely upon getting good information from others, just as the board is relying upon getting good information from me that I present to them. I don't want them coming in second guessing everything that I'm doing. I don't want to go and second guess my directors and my department heads as to what they're doing. I'm going to assume that they're doing the job the way they're supposed to be doing it, and I can count on what they've given me. So it's about being able to have people in a position so that you can trust that they're going to do their job correctly, so that you can work as efficiently as you can to be able to have that division of labor and allow them to do their work.
Hi, my name is Phil Munter, and I'm a newbie up here. I haven't lived here very many years. I've never been involved in school board meetings, but I've started coming, and I've seen so much dissension going on in this community that I thought, well, I want to go find out what's going on. I have friends that are very strongly on both sides of the recall, and they're telling me, oh, you need to go vote for this recall, and others can say, no, you don't, and I've been asking a lot of questions. I really feel sorry for you, Branden. I would hate to step into a mess that you've inherited that was going on before you got here. Doesn't mean everybody's been bad and has wrong intentions and what they've been doing, in my eyes, are right. They might have certain things that therefore I might not agree with. Doesn't matter, but I would hate to step in and try to serve a community that was so polarized. One thing I'd like to address, I was at the meeting a few nights ago and they were talking about the boiler at the junior high, and I didn't realize there was such a big issue over whether to keep the school, get rid of it, do this, move the kids. I understand all the arguments, and depending on where you are in life and whether your kids are in that school, it makes a huge difference. If you're a teacher serving those kids and their families, it makes a big difference. And if you're on administration trying to find out the best solution for everybody, it's impossible. But my background is more into mechanical things, so I asked to go take a little tour of the junior high and walk through it, and I saw a really old building, and I saw a boiler, and I saw pipes that were corroded and really bad, and I used to own my own business, so I had to do a little bit of administration, not with a lot of people or big budgets like things have to be taken care of here. But a lot of times you have to work out and find the best solution. But one thing I did find out, and it seems like this wasn't the last opinion up here at the table, but I found out there was some money budgeted for repairing or replacing the boiler. And it was put into a budget, and all of a sudden it wasn't there anymore. There's been some very drastic things going on with the handling of money. I have no idea why or who's behind it. But I'll tell you something that really bothers me is this recall. I'm not against just the recall because I don't know that much about it. But the recall is being put on these board members so quickly that there is not even time for maybe another 3 or 6 months to see if they can get things straightened out. And why if I understand right, I hear a lot of rumors like you all do. If it's $40,000 for, is that correct? Is it about 40? That's kind of a pinch. It's wasting the money isn't the thing. I think people are mad about other things. They don't want this audit to go on because there's some other thing maybe they want. What is the matter with giving some time, having a recall election next year after they've had a little bit of time to figure out what's going on, what are possible solutions for it? It's being done so fast, it's just a big angry thing. Okay.
It didn't start last.
Oh, the problems, they definitely, yeah, they've been. But even just this audit, how about enough time to take a look and say, were these things really happened, changed out of budgeted items and moved to others? Who knows, maybe they've gone long, yeah, I don't know. But it has to all be done so quickly. The administration doesn't seem to have time to even find out what really has gone on. Well, there's a lot of different people there now too, and also I understand the secretaries of, yeah. Okay, but I wanted to say, no, there have been things moved out of the budget, moved to other places. I do know that.
Well, I'm doing a little change of subject, but I do have a concern and a question about how the K-12 Hillsdale curriculum has been brought into our public school district, and what that's going to mean for our district if that is accepted. Hillsdale, if some of you don't know, it is a conservative Christian school. I don't have anything against that. It's separate from public schools, but they have developed a curriculum that I feel we need to really closely take a look at, whether this is something good for our district. And also, we have a new special ed superintendent that's connected to Liberty University, another Christian university, which, I guess I feel like there's some kind of, I'm not trying to create drama, but there is some kind of agenda here, and I feel like it needs to be addressed. I also, you made a statement at one of the meetings that, there's a myth between church and state. I don't agree. There is a separation, and I think we have to be very careful about how we proceed and what we choose for our students to get an education. Thank you.
Do you have a specific question I can answer?
Do you have a comment?
Okay, so first of all, the Curriculum Adoption Committee is going to go through its, board policy outlined responsibility, and to the extent they choose to go one way or another with a curriculum or multiple curriculums. I know that when I spoke with Peggy originally about the role of being curriculum director, we talked about having 2 separate ELA curriculums and having us put them on a trial basis for a period of time, and then like having one curriculum at PRE and the other curriculum at Idaho Hill and at the lake, and then going for a period of time swapping, and then that was a suggestion that she'd made, that we could do it that way to and then solicit feedback from parents and teachers and students to see what we have. It could be the case that we find a way to meld one curriculum with another, and that is something we can do too. And I told, and according to Peggy, that's something that the district has done in the past, where it's taken something out of one thing and taken something out of something else and utilized that. And I said that may be where we end up, but I don't want to, as I say in a lot of different contexts, I don't want to presuppose a solution before a process takes place, because if the solution's already been decided upon, then there's no reason to go through the process. And that was the case with the junior high, for example. We had gone through our due diligence, but a decision hadn't been made. And the same thing is going to be true with our curriculum adoption. Yes, there are people on the board who have a strong opinion about what curriculum we should have, but they also recognize that we have a process that we need to go through, and that process needs to inform decision making. It needs to inform their decision making. That's all part of this. So we're going to work through those the right way. We're going to make sure that we do our due diligence. This is something that I need to work on, and I acknowledge that. I love change, and I move on change very quickly, and I'm very comfortable with it. And I am overly comfortable with change. And I recognize not everyone has, thank goodness, most people don't have that proclivity for change. Most people need to have time to warm up to something and to think about it. I'm not that way, so the idea of saying, okay, yeah, we've gotten these things done, I say, why is it taking us so long? We should have been able to do it in half that time. We recognize there's a problem, here's the solution, we'll go through that, But I get that people take more, most people, same people, need more time to think through things and, kind of think about it and chew on it a little bit before they become comfortable. And I recognize that I am the outlier in that. So it's how I was built. I'm really quite accepting of trying to move different ways. But it's also a strength because I don't get locked in. I identify, if it doesn't work, I'll adapt, I'll re-strategize and move on. So to the extent that from a curriculum perspective or anything else, ultimately whatever the board decides with the recommendation of the Curriculum Adoption Committee, the curriculum director, and myself as superintendent, ultimately whatever they decide is what we will do as a district. And I'm hopeful, and my encouragement to the board will be that whatever they do, that they try to walk a line that's not increasing division. So I could foresee a world where part of the Hillsdale curriculum, for example, is adopted and it's supplemented by something else. Where those that think that's a good idea can have their piece of the pie, and those who don't can have their piece of the pie, and we kind of get to a win-win situation. Because to the extent that we can eliminate zero-sum games, we should. We should try to find the Pareto optimum, the win-win situation, and utilize those. So, are there more questions? Yes, sir.
Morning.
Hi.
My name's Jim Baldry. Pleased to meet you, Brandon. With regards to curriculum, there's a couple of high-performing charter schools just south of us. CDA Charter, North Idaho STEM, I think, is Rathdrum. And the Rathdrum School District seems to knock test scores out of the park in general. Any thoughts on taking let's call it an administrative field trip just to see what the heck those folks are doing different than what we're doing up here?
Yeah, I think anytime we can learn from other districts, we should. You know, whether that's in the academic world, whether that's in the operational world. You know, if they're able to cut costs in places, we should, you know, look at what they're doing and trying to figure out how they're doing that. You know, there are a few things that need to be kept in mind. You can't always take what one group has and apply it to yourself, because you have differences within your community, right? And I've talked about this in other forums before between, you know, what are our competitive advantages as a district, as a community? You know, and to the extent that this is not a commodity system, you know, the transferability is not always perfect. But there are things that we can look at that can inform our decision making, that can help us do a better job. So we can look at, that's one of the things that we looked at when we talked about adding a curriculum director, for example. Most school districts, regardless of size in the state of Idaho, unless they're really, really teeny tiny, you know, districts with 1,000 or more students, which is, you know, where we are, they have a curriculum director. And so when I walked in and I said, we don't have a curriculum director here. We don't have an assistant superintendent here. That's unusual. Like, most districts of our size have one or the other. Some have both. I mean, that's probably unnecessarily bloated from an administrative standpoint. But we should have had, so I said, well, why don't we have that? And then I made some calls to some other superintendents in the state. I talked to some other people, and I said, look, I thought it was strange. I thought it was unusual, just trying to get to the broader context of your question. I thought, this is strange to me that we don't have this. And what I concluded after those conversations is this is something we have to do, you know, to be able to provide additional support to our instructional staff and to our parents and to our students. This is an area that the money needs to be spent. You know, we need to continue to spend money in places that add value. And for all the other districts I looked at, they did that. So to the extent we can look at curriculum that other districts are using, that we can look at instructional techniques that other districts are utilizing, you know, how can we change our pedagogy? Can we do different types of differentiation within our classrooms? Can we use, you know, different, you know, whatever the thing is, what can we learn? Because that's part of, you know, in an educational system, it's about being a lifelong learner, and organizationally, we should be lifelong learners. We shouldn't be satisfied with, this is how we've always done it. We should always seek to innovate, always. And I've told my staff, the people that directly report to me, because we've always done it, that way isn't a good answer. And in fact, if I hear that answer, I'm gonna probably rebuke them in some way, because we've always done it that way, clearly hasn't worked. Find a new way, do something different.
Exactly. Just to follow up for my own benefit, a little hard on the with the speakers here in my ears. I think I heard you talk earlier about revamping the math program at the high school. Any thoughts on doing that on the K through 8 level, and any thoughts on revamping English language arts?
So here's what I would say. We've got, you know, we have good teachers here. And we've got folks who do a good job. We're getting 2 new staff in the LEA at the secondary level, is that right? 2? They're joining you? Don't you teach them? Oh, you don't. Okay, I thought you did, sorry. We have two new LEA teachers that are coming in. That'll be great. Same thing where they have master's level stuff. That's great. We have a lot of new staff coming in to our K-8 level. I am super excited about Loretta taking over the junior high. And I know there's some folks that have been a little bit down on her because she's hard, but I think that you need hardness. I know as a coach, one of the things that I experienced with some of our players is that they had been so pampered and they were so soft that any degree of correction was just met with they couldn't handle it. And that's not how we build a strong society. You know, the idea is, you know, tough societies build strong men, easy societies build weak men. You know, we are riding into that world where we have an easy society that's building weak men and weak women. And we need to be able to strengthen them. And part of that is through having people that hold you accountable, that tell you that this is the expectation and we're going to push you until you get to that place. And as a parent, that's what I strongly believe in with my kids. We don't give excuses. You don't give excuses, you give the results. That's what you do. And I'm really excited about Loretta having that same mentality for our junior high school students who are transitioning into a new phase of life and saying, yes, you were in kindergarten, you were in elementary school before, things were softer and easier, but now you're into a new world. And you need to put up, you need to do your job, you need to be held accountable for what you do and what you do not do. And we need to be able to lead, because the reason we have a public education system in the state of Idaho is to support a republic. It comes right out of Article 9, Section 1 of the Idaho Constitution. The whole point is for our republic. And you don't have a republic very long if you have people who can't withstand criticism, who aren't held accountable, who are rudderless ships. And so I'm excited about the new changes we're making district-wide to make that happen, because we have to hold ourselves accountable. And when things don't work out, the accountability is from the top down. It starts with me, and it goes down to the building administrators, to the teachers, and then to the parents and students.
Coming out today and the other meetings that you've done, and I appreciate the engagement with the community. Thank you.
Hi, I'm gonna kind of go off of what he said with the charter schools and the test scores. And charter school, I know we talk about the teacher involvement, but a lot of it is parent involvement. I mean, we live in a poor district. Not all parents are involved. Like, my girls do great in school, but again, I'm a very active parent. Not all parents are active, and when kids are living in traumatizing environments and their parents aren't involved, they're not going to be worrying about scores. So again, just to kind of lead in on that, it's not just the teachers. And again, like I said, these charter schools, some of them you pay for that. You're paying to go to that school. So again, they're going to have higher scores. Another just quick question I had, I know we talked about the sped director, she's going to get flown up. Again, so is all this money for her flights, emergency flights, or is the district paying for all of this?
Yeah, so we are going to do a raise for the administrators in this district, which the special education is in that salary schedule for administrators. That position's not going to see a raise. And part of that's to compensate for these extra costs. We're gonna be mindful. We looked at the cost. It's not that much. If we buy them in advance, I think she's flying out of San Antonio. The flights round trip are like $350, maybe $400. If we buy them in advance, we can get them for less than that. So we're gonna actually, next week, we're planning to meet with her via Zoom, because that's our first official day is Monday. We're gonna look at the calendar. We're gonna look at, Tracy's gonna look at some of the sped direct, some of the IEPs and 504s, and kind of group them together, and to make sure that we can get them done. And it'll cost the district maybe $2,000, which would still be less than we paid our previous person, or we would have paid a new person if we'd had somebody local. Of course, we would have preferred to have somebody local, but that didn't materialize. And we'll also have a couple flights paid for that are fully refundable that we have in hand, so that we can use those for emergency purposes. We'll have those all ready to go, so that they don't cost us an arm and leg. Because if we were to buy a flight last second, it could cost us like $1,500, $2,000. So we're going to just be ready for that, and we'll just have those flights already purchased and kind of just be able to push them in when we need to.
Okay, and then are you also covering per stay in a rental car? I mean, there's not really any rentals around here. Is she staying like in a hotel for the week, or what's that look like?
So Mrs. Parker has in a private conversation, offered to let her stay with her. I don't want to commit that for her until her husband knows. But that's my understanding, is that she said she has a guest room. She's happy to let the sped director stay with her when she's in town. And as far as transportation, it's a small town. I'm sure myself or Tracy or Lynn or somebody else would be more than happy to pick her up and get her where she needs to go.
So I'm gonna go pick her up at the airport and then bring
Yeah.
her back home.
Yeah.
I volunteer for that.
I'm sitting because you can't see me otherwise.
That's fine. I'm sitting because my back hurts.
Annie McMahon. My question for you has to do with your returning teachers and their lack of getting a contract. I understand negotiations is not done. However, historically within this district, contracts were issued with a memorandum of understanding that once negotiations were settled and the salary schedule adjusted accordingly, that their new contracts would show that. So will the staff, the returning staff, be getting some form of a contract before they start in 2 weeks?
Yes.
And when will that be for them?
So we looked back, and last year, Tracy did some investigation on this. Last year, the contracts were sent out on August 16th. So not to say that that's when we want to send them out, but we know that we're not as late as they were last year.
Was that contract, however, their final contract sent out on August 16th with the adjustment?
That I don't know. What I can tell you, part of the complicating factor we have is that the previous negotiated agreement is based off of a 187-day contract. I don't think any teachers here plan on working 187 days on contract this school year. So I have, in consultation with Andy Grover with the Idaho Association of School Administrators, and others, I've put together language to add into the contract. I've sent that to 2 board members on the negotiations team. I'm waiting to hear back from one of them to approve. Then it's going to go to Mike, and hopefully Mike will approve the language that I've written, and then we'll put it into the contracts and send them out.
So just to make sure I'm understanding, clarified. So the hang up with the contract is because we're going to a 4-day school week instead of the 5-day.
Right.
And it's just going to be here's your last year contract for right now, sign. Thank you for that, because I know staff has been very concerned, and that right there is a great reason for them to understand what's going on and to have some compassion for the district staff. And I would assume also I know our district staff is competent, but they're learning a new system, and it doesn't matter how great you are in your skill set. When you go to learn a new program, it's got to be challenging. So is that hanging things up a little bit?
That's been the biggest problem, because otherwise what we could have done is we had a provision in the contract that says, this contract is based off the 2023 negotiated agreement, and the salary contained therein and shall be retroactively applied to the 23-24 negotiated agreement, at which time it's adopted, and gives the district 2 months to catch up on payments to make that up. If that was all we had to do, that's been ready for 3 weeks. The dilemma we've had is this issue around changing contract days. Well, there's a mouse. Ralph S. Mouse is here. He's not on his motorcycle this morning. His motorcycle is absent. Somebody call facilities. No, I'm kidding. Not really, because it's in our kitchen. That's gross. Don't let the health code people find that out. We will not be having lunch. We're now moving the junior high school to the junior high, so we can serve lunch. Sorry, guys. High school students will be anyway. So that's unsettling. Look, we live. My house down south is in the country. We've been dealing with this for the last 6 weeks. That's why my wife hasn't been coming up. It's because we've had mice in our traps every day for the last 5 weeks. But anyway, so that's the biggest issue. We can't just do a transfer one like we normally would have been able to. And I've really, to be honest, I was really hopeful we'd have an agreement so I wouldn't have to think up something. But now we are to a place where you guys need to have contracts. Like teachers need to have those contracts done. And so we're going to have that language. I want to make sure that my side, my trustees are comfortable with language, and then I want to make sure that Mike, as the representative of the association, is comfortable with language. And as long as those 3 parts are in agreement that that's what we've got, then we'll be able to shoot those out. And we're We're also in the process, as you guys understand, we get transcripts from teachers. They tend to put them in the last second. Some of them are better about getting them done earlier, but some do it because they're like, oh crap, my contract's gonna get approved. I wanna make sure I get credit for whatever I've done. So we're trying to work through that process too, to make sure those are all updated.
Perfect, thank you for that.
And just so that the teachers in the audience know, we're going to do that on a building by building basis. Once that language is approved, we're going to start with our smallest building and go from there, so each building gets done one at a time. So that's going to be the process that we go through. Not because we like one building than another, but just so that way our staff can focus on, we're calling them cost centers. So each cost center can be addressed one at a time.
Okay, I just have a question for you. We lost a lot of good teachers this last year. You've got a lot of new teachers coming in. Can you address to those parents that are sitting out there thinking, I'm sending my kids to school on September 5th and I don't quite know what to expect? It seems that maybe there'll be curriculum in place at that time. So you've got possibly no curriculum for these teachers. You've got teachers that are brand new to the district, and you've got parents out there seriously concerned about whether this is going to go well. There's been a lot of people that I've heard, and both my daughters also, we've got grandkids coming in. The talk of homeschool, change into another school. Can you give some kind of a statement of support or what your plan is on this? Or to those parents specifically.
So here's what I can share. I've spoke with our building administrators. I can tell you that Lynn Parker has said she's really excited actually for her new staff. She's thought, in her words, she's gotten really lucky with the quality of teachers she's bringing in to replace some really good teachers. So I don't think we will see a reduction in quality of instruction. There will be teachers. I think in some departments we probably will have potentially better instruction than we've had before. I think, and that's not to say that people before them weren't doing a good job, but we're bringing in some really strong people that have a lot of experience that have chosen to come here, and that's great. That's a win for our students. That's a win for our district. As far as the curriculum is concerned, again, I don't want to jump the gun. I don't want to get out ahead of what that process looks like. It goes back to what I've already stated. Peggy is phenomenally qualified as a curriculum director. I don't want to circumvent or in any way displace what she is responsible for and assume to tell her how to do her job. Because I'm not qualified to tell her how to do her job. That's why I hired her. And I want her to be able to do the process the way she wants to. Are we going to have a new curriculum adopted before September 5th? I think that's probably unlikely. It could be the case that we have a couple curriculum that she recommends that we try by September 5th, and that starts to get rolled out to our students and to our teachers by that date. But again, I don't want to tell her how to do her job. She knows. This is how I approach it, and just so this is true for all of the people that report to me. This is where I want you to be by this point. This is what I tell them. This is where I want you to be by this point. I don't care how you get there. Don't break the law. Follow the fidelity of the district. Do things the right way. And you get there how you need to get there. And I trust you to do that because I wouldn't have hired them if I didn't trust them. And the same thing's true for our building administrators. This is where I want your building to be at the end of the year, or at the end of the semester, or the end of the quarter. You figure it out. You're the professional.
Okay, another question. Who does teacher reviews? Is that up to the principal of the building?
Yes.
Okay. So, and are parents going to, maybe to be able to put their mind at ease, I'm assuming that they are welcome to come sit during class time to,
I am all about parents coming into classrooms. Probably to the extent that it would make our union uncomfortable. I think parents should be able to show up unannounced instead at any time they want. Okay. Like I think that if your child is in this building or whatever building they're in, you didn't stop being their parent just because they came onto school property. And you have an intrinsic God-given right to be in their presence whenever you damn well feel like it. pardon the poor language. But I feel very strongly about that.
Hi, thanks for all you do. Just as a point of clarification, charter schools, magnet schools are all public schools. There's no tuition paid at any charter schools. Some charter schools perform high, some charter schools perform low. The benefit that charter schools have is they are allowed more flexibility to innovate, whereas standard public schools don't have that same opportunity. Charter schools often get a bad rap for not allowing students in or being selective. Again, that's not the case. By state law, they are required to allow everyone in that they can let in. Now, some people get denied because they're at capacity and they can't fit those kids in. Just like at a regular school, some kids get denied. If you try to take your kids over to Sandpoint or down to Spirit Lake, they might not get in. It's still a public school, it's still required. I'm glad that Superintendent Durst says he's comfortable with innovation. I hope that happens. Some innovation goes good, some innovation goes bad. Lastly, again, no question or anything, just a comment, but there's a lot of other members in the community who are invested in the community that don't have kids in the school district, okay? That's part of the division, right? There are property owners who don't have kids who are against the levy. There are property owners that don't have kids who are for the levy, right? We need to pull the whole community together and not say, well, you don't get to say because you don't have a kid in the school. There's teachers here that teach that don't have their kids in the school. We need to pull everyone together to be unified, to make some changes, to improve. Thank you.
Piggyback off that, it goes back to what Kylie's question was too. Like, the parental involvement piece is huge. And even in like, so one of the guys in my cohort for my EDS program, he's the charter administrator at Elevate Academy down in Caldwell. Elevate Academy is designed specifically for at-risk students. They are a career technical education program. They try to find these kids who are kind of on their last train out of town, you know, and a lot of those kids don't have the support of their families that they need to have. But what we do know is that an engaged parent is highly correlated with a successful student. And that's why the previous question about, can my kids come in, can we come see what's going on? The answer is absolutely, because of those things. Those have a direct connection with each other. Parents who feel like they can participate will. And I think this is just a larger critique that I've had of public ed in general, is pushing parents away and telling them we're the experts, we're going to make the decision as what's happening, and not trusting them that they're the experts in their own kid. Nobody knows my kids better than I do. I don't know your kid. We could have a teacher be your kid's teacher for 10 years. You still know them better than that teacher does. And at the end of the day, you are more personally invested in that child's outcome than anyone else. Because when they fail, they come to you. When they succeed, they come to you. When they get in trouble, they come to you. You're the one who's held accountable for what they do, not the teacher, not the parent, or not the building principal, not the superintendent. It's you. And so I think we have to do everything we can to remove those barriers so that parents can become more involved. And a lot of that's a societal issue that I don't want to get into right now around dual income homes and the need to have those sorts of things. But we've got problems that make it hard for a lot of parents to get involved, and that has had a direct impact on our student outcomes. And to the extent that we as a school district can do things to promote parental engagement, whether that be flexible with our times for parent-teacher conferences. I had a time when I was a parent, well, I still am a parent, but I had a time as a parent where I had a teacher tell me they weren't going to accommodate my availability to have a conference for my kid. They said, this is the times we have available. If you can't make that, I'm sorry. I said, it's not my fault that I work those hours every single day, and I'm in a position that does not allow me to take time off to do this. Can you be more accommodating? No, I'm sorry, I can't be more accommodating. This is what my contract says. This is when I have to be available. This is when I will be available. There are teachers, most teachers will say, I'll make the time, we'll make it work. I want you to be involved. But we have to make sure it's clear that those sorts of barriers don't have a place here. That if a parent wants to meet with a teacher to talk about their kid, that we're as accommodating, as welcoming as we can be, because we want that parent involved, because if they are, it'll help everybody downstream.
Thank you, Mr. Durst. My name is Jane Purdy, and I want to thank everybody for coming out today, because it's hard to drive interest a lot of times, so I appreciate everyone's involvement here. In the interest of dispelling, hopefully, some, and on the tails of the gentleman who just spoke, some misinformation regarding Hillsdale curriculum, I realize that Hillsdale is not, potentially not even on the table, and that's fine. But first, there was some concern initially when Hillsdale was introduced, when Jackie Branden was superintendent, because they thought that they were buying into it hook, line, and sinker, that money had been spent on it, and none of that was true. There was never any money spent on it. It was just an interest. It was something they were exploring. Also, from a Hillsdale, they released a common misconceptions about it, and I'm just going to read one short paragraph here. Should I find the right one? Okay. And it refers also to charter schools. It says, by law, charter schools are public schools and have no religious affiliation. The public charter schools that affiliate with Hillsdale College K through 12 education office are no different. The curricula offered by Hillsdale College is not religious or Christian. The consultation offered from the Hillsdale College Education Office is not religious or Christian. So Hillsdale College is a constitutional curriculum. And I know that as North Idahoans, much of the reason that many of us are here, if you weren't born here, is because of the constitutional stand North Idaho takes. We love our Constitution. We love our country. We want to adhere to that. And that is what Hillsdale curriculum does. I have homeschooled my children. I have 8 children, and we have lived overseas for many years, and so I chose to homeschool them primarily because of that. When I heard that Hillsdale might be, was being considered here, that was a great interest to me, and I thought, man, if I still had kids that were children that were school age, I would consider putting them in school just for that fact, because it is a fantastic curriculum. So again, I have no idea whether this curriculum is going to be on a future, under scrutiny, but I wanted to put maybe some of those things to rest, and if it does come up again, I wanted people not to be alarmed that it's, bringing in something they wouldn't want. Thank you.
Are there more questions? We exhausted them before noon. That's awesome. I'll just kind of close by saying this. I appreciate the investment in time you all have made today. It certainly is appreciated. And just the engagement that many of you have had in the schools in general. I recognize that you're taking your personal time to be here and to do things that you're doing, and to the extent that the district office can be of support to you, please let us know. We are diligently working through a lot of different things, and I think our team is really gelling well and getting things done in a really high quality and expeditious way. I will let everyone know we are planning 2 weeks from yesterday, so yesterday was the 11th, I believe, August 25th. We are looking at having a movie night here on the track. The district is not paying for that. I am, out of my own pocket. We'll have ice cream and popcorn and stuff. We're going to show the real Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie. My 2 little guys will be dressed up as Oompa Loompas, and my wife will be Violet Beauregard as the blueberry version, and I'll be Willy Wonka. And we're just going to try to offer an opportunity for the community to come and have some fun before the school year starts. So keep an eye out for that as we get closer to that date. It'll either be Friday or Saturday. We may end up having it on a Saturday just because of that 25th is the date we are going to have the Forensic Audit Report come out, so we may want to give a day separation, but it'll be one of those 2 days. We'll know that first of next week. So all are welcome to attend, and we're excited to be able to do something nice for our community and hopefully build some relationship there. So I appreciate, again, you guys being here, and I'll hang around for just a little bit. If you had a question that you didn't want to ask in front of everybody, if you have questions for me directly, I'm happy to answer them. So.
I appreciate all that you and the school board are doing for this community. I don't have any children here. I was born and raised in eastern Montana. My graduating class was 23 students. I appreciate the fact that you're encouraging parents to be involved with their children. The biggest issue with children that are in trouble come from single parent families. Whether it's the mother or the father, they can't work away from home and give their children guidance as well. And you're accommodating a time when the parent can come and visit with the teachers and the children. That is a plus. And I was born and raised a cattleman and a rancher, farm and rancher. We get together, meetings, conventions, and we discuss things. Well, I like this vaccine. Well, why do you like that? Well, I like this feed. Well, why do you like that? I like this cow. Why do you like that cow? We discuss things and come up with something that works for everybody. We don't go there with guns and try and outshout everybody. We let them speak and learn from it. So you're an encouragement, you and the school board, are trying to uncover all this mess and still keep the kids going. And if these teachers that have left the district, if they're such good teachers and so worried about the students, why did they leave? Why don't stay and fight for them?
Well, we have, I don't want to disparage anybody who's chosen to leave the district. Everybody has their own reasons to leave. But what I know is that we don't live life in the rearview mirror. We live life looking through the windshield. And so we're going to do what we have to do to be able to continue to fight for our community and for our kids and make sure they can be successful. And that's what we're committed to doing. And, I snickered a little bit because 3 weeks ago I was down in Boise and happened to be coinciding with our cows were getting slaughtered. And I had the mental image, which was about 3 weeks ago, almost exactly this time of day, on a Saturday, that I was watching cows get strung up and skinned, and I thought everybody that has beef should have to watch that at least once.
On the note, it's slaughtered, it's probably time to leave.
Yeah, so anyway, thank you all for being here today. I appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much.